titled "The State of the Lightning Network." There have been other presentations with the same title. They are about the situation of channel capacity, nodes, versions, but I will not do anything of that. I don't deal in facts and numbers, only in feelings and metaphors. So it's a different kind of presentation. It's divided in two parts. First, there is the unimportant stuff, because some of you are not here physically yet, and even the ones that are here physically are not with us spiritually yet. So I will give you some time with unimportant stuff, and at the half of my presentation, so in 4 hours, I will move to the important stuff when you are finally ready. So the unimportant stuff is the state of the progression of the Lightning Network in terms of payment user experience and privacy of the payments, and also security of the funds on the Lightning Network, and interoperability of industry-wise open standards. I will not discuss decentralization, because I think that decentralization is in a way a function of these things. If running a node or keeping your keys is easy from the point of view of the UX, or has no counter arguments in terms of security of the funds, people will tend to do it, or they will start doing it when forced by governments and stuff like that. So I will not discuss decentralization in general. This is the unimportant stuff. Then, when you are finally awake, I will move to the important stuff, the stuff that I really care about, which is non-stop bike shading over terminology, symbols, acronyms, icons, fonts, and color palettes. You can relax now, you can chat a little bit, go out, take a coffee, come back for the real part of the presentation. So let's start with privacy of payments. Privacy of payments, I think, can basically, sorry, not privacy, the UX of payments. I think it can be broken down more or less into the progressive work, the progressive job wallet developers are doing to abstract away the difference between Lightning and on-chain payment. You remember the first wallets? The first wallets were basically terrible. You have to the first 𝐓𝐿 compared to the current Phoenix was a totally different story. You had to move on-chain the funds on the wallet, moving them, then opening a channel, then maybe you could start using it and not receiving anyway until you spend to swap. Then you have the second generations like Phoenix, 𝗓𝗡, in his way also Moon, which is forcing you to stay on-chain without telling you. I think this is very important because if you deal with people, it's already hard to know what Bitcoin is. To distinguish the layer based on the use is very hard. And when you open a browser, you don't know if you are still pinging IP nodes around the globe, or you are establishing a TCP connection. You don't know. That's abstracted away. The second part will be the automation of these relationships, because I think that in the future you will just show a single QR and your wallet will know if you want to go on chain or if you want to go on Lightning, based on the amount, based on the existence or not of a good routing. So if the routing will fail, probably the wallet will default on opening a new channel and stuff like that. So we are seeing the first step in this direction, but we're still very, very early. That is failure management. In Lightning payments, when the payments fails, it's still very awkward. You usually don't know why. There is not an automatic fallback. Compared to advanced protocols like the internet, we're still very, very, very early on. And then there is the real the biggest problem of the UX in Lightning, which is you cannot be offline. You cannot be offline for a very long time for security, but especially you cannot receive offline in a meaningful way if you're not using a custodian. I think that's 99% of the reason people are using custodial solutions right now. I don't always have my server on. There are some. This is a slide from a presentation I gave about kind of this stuff in El Salvador last November, and then I gave another the November before. If you are interested in my hot takes on this topic, this is the wrong way to put it. Since you are interested in my hot takes on this topic, you can watch the video. What happened recently that we were discussing also yesterday, I will just put in slides some news about this kind of problems. One news we witnessed yesterday through some presentation by Christian Decker. There is a new actor in the town, which is a Greenlight by Blockstream, a way to keep custody of your keys in your device, but to delegate in a reasonable way most of the heavy lifting of the node part to a remote server. That could be Blockstream's remote server, or eventually, hopefully, also a bunch of self-hosted remote server. This is very important, and not only we have Greenlight by Blockstream live, we also have the first mobile wallet actually integrated with Greenlight to bring Lightning on mobile. Of course, it is Blockstream Green. I'm joking. It is Breeze. Blockstream gets you slow. And this is something new for sure. Then there is a debate going on. This image is very old, from an interesting debate back in El Salvador. But this debate is going on between 𝐿𝑁𝑢RL and Vol12. So a way to abstract away the fact that you have a static kind, something you can tattoo finally. I mean, the real problem of Lightning is that we cannot have tattoos because invoices will expire. Now we can, but still don't. Please wait for the tattoo because there is still a debate ongoing. And when we were discussing 𝐿𝑁𝑢RL versus Vol12, basically there are many trade-offs. The main trade-off is that one thing is theoretically optimal for many reasons. The problem to set up a server, some possible privacy reasons with Tor, etc., overclearness. The other is ready now and is widespread now. So the trade-off between a solution which may not be theoretically optimal but is ready and widespread, and the other which is way better in theory, in my opinion, but is still a long way from being adopted. There are some news though. For example, there is 𝐴𝐸 adding support for Vol12, and of course there is Rust Lightning that did it a little ago. And then there is 𝐶 Lightning, Core Lightning, which basically pioneered the offer adoption, the Vol12 adoption in general. The last time I mentioned 𝐿𝑁𝑢RL versus Vol12, John basically told me that there is another competitor in theory, which is /pay with the /tag. And yesterday we were discussing with many people about the fact that there are also people trying to implement kind of static quasi servers to have a voice over Nostr. So I also add these two other competitors that in general I find very interesting in their interactions. It's not trivial the set of trade-offs that are there and the way that they will evolve. In a way, I think this is similar to the previous slide, in the sense that probably Slashtags is a more carefully designed solution, while Nostr is just something that is exploding now, and everybody's basically going for now. So it has a huge network effect. So it would be interesting to see if there will be some kind of convergence, some kind of winner takes it all, or some kind of interface or something like that. Or maybe Nostr will not be interesting for payments at all. But I mean, you can see right now people are zapping each other on Nostr a lot, which is a replacement for static UI. You just go to the username, you have the public key of Nostr, you go and use that. So it is a de facto replacement of that. There is also BIP21, which I think is very interesting. One of the problems of new protocols to interact is that you will have a backward compatibility problem. And this unified QR idea is very nice. The idea is that you use the old payment URI, and first you put the fallback Bitcoin address on chain, and then in the following payload you put the advanced stuff. So the wallet cannot interact; it will default on the old stuff. But people are thinking about using this kind of dynamic for more advanced things. For example, there is a payjoin.org actually using the BIP21 idea to actually help with the coordination of a payjoin. So this is not lightning related, but my point would be that when we have a great protocol for Lightning, like Pol 12, then we also have basically a replacement of Bitcoin's payment protocol. So we have a general way to contact the server and ask, hey, can you do a payjoin with me? Can you do a coin swap with me? Can you do whatever? Because then you have basically a synchronous chat between the two servers. There are some advancements about the idea of asynchronous payment. 𝐴𝐶 just added initial support for async payment via trampoline nodes. So it's not yet something that the end user can do alone, but via trampoline it can be done. And well, there are other technical stuff that precedes this. There is a very recent idea by Anthony Towns about a proof of payment for asynchronous payment, which, as you know, is many servers can actually intermediate a payment when you are offline, but they need a proof that you have been paid in order to give you the server. An example is @and_cal. People are paying Lightning to book my hours, but right now it's custodian because if I am offline and I'm not using my node, there is no way the service can know that I've been paid in a certain way in order to actually book my calendar. So these kind of proofs are very important. This proof in particular is dependent on the idea of PTLC instead of HTLC. So it's still probably a long way, but it's interesting. Another thing is, well, of course, well, I wanted to mention Roy because Roy was one of the first people to propose this asynchronous payment, and the way I fixated with this blog post is because it was the most baddest name for a asynchronous payment system ever. Lightning Roy, it's perfect if you think about that. I'm sorry that it was not, well, maybe it will be used by Roy. And then speaking of UX, I think BitKit, still by John, is very interesting in the way that it's abstractly way the concept of what is Lightning and what is on-chain. So many of you will try it already. There is a spending account, saving, you just slide the slider, and when you slide the slider, basically the wallet will move some of your funds on channels or out of channels, which is as an abstraction, I think is very, very useful. It could be kind of easy to understand even for not deeply orange pill people. Then let's move to privacy. And privacy also has many components. There is in Lightning can be a great advancement for privacy because one of the weakest point of Bitcoin's privacy is the on-chain eternal presence of all the transactions. And with Lightning, you don't have that. You are basically staying private. You're staying local. You're staying between peers. You're not leaving traces forever for everybody. But there are weaknesses so far. One weakness is the link between channels and on-chain UTXOs, trivially from channel ID, but there are many, many other links that can extend. They can basically make chain analysis creep into Lightning as well. And then there are the payment links between different nodes. So you can follow the payments doing probing or doing timing correlation or other kind of similar attacks or other kind of stuff. Then there are other, like there is a sending privacy for people that want to send a Lightning payment is very good right now. It can be very good if you want. Receiving privacy is very, very hard to accomplish. And that's also one of the reasons that you don't see a darknet market implemented Lightning Network yet, which is bad because if you cannot use your money for weed, it's not money. It's like social credit score. And so this is something we have to respect. So and then, well, one thing is being private when you receive, and the other thing is being private when you route, and that's an intrinsic there because in order to route stuff, you have to tell people your capacity and to a certain extent your balance, because if you don't, people don't know if they will fail passing through you in one direction or not. So the more you tell people that you have channels, your capacity, your balance, the easier it will be for them to route through you, but the worse will be, of course, the overall privacy of the system, because you are updating them about the balances, which is bad, because that can help tracking payments. I made a more systematic breakdown of privacy and Lightning, which came down to these. I will not, it is like in blue, there are the possible things that we are waiting for to implement, like Taproot dual funding, integration with PayJoin, PLC, payment secrets, the situation with Tor, private channel, route planning, trampoline nodes. Since you are interested in my takes about Lightning and privacy, you can watch this video from Lightning Hack Days Istanbul. The quality of the video is very bad. You cannot basically see it, which is basically half of the reason people watch my videos anyway. So you lose all the aesthetic side, but the audio is also very, very bad. But the image is great. Like, look at the symmetry of this image. I mean, you have to see it. So another new thing that is going on. Yesterday you had the presentation about RGB. RGB was presented mostly for other reasons, but there is, Maxime mentioned, the strong connection between RGB and privacy. Of course, RGB, we were joking with Vitali yesterday, finally you can use shitcoin properly, because you can use shitcoin privately. You should be ashamed of moving shitcoins around, and finally you can do it secretly, as it should. And but there is also a consequence about Bitcoin itself, about the real stuff. The first consequence is that maybe in the future we will have some kind of RGBDC, some kind of RGB image of Bitcoin itself, and the kind of protocol that RGB is very, very, very private. Nothing is on chain, everything is local, everything is client side. So the privacy of RGB is great. If we can move Bitcoin in and back, which is the sidechain peg problem, which is not trivial, but that would be great. But also, even right now, shitcoins can help Bitcoin privacy on Lightning. If you have a channel that you don't know if this channel is moving, only the Bitcoin you see, or the Bitcoin you see and some other kind of assets, including, for example, fiat credit. I know that cool kids like Federico will call it stable coin, but it's fiat credit. If you move fiat credit around and you move satoshis around, you complicate the heuristics to understand what's going on. So it's helping actively Bitcoin privacy. Another thing, there are other things that are already mentioned. For example, B21 interaction with this. There is route blending, which is finally making into the specs of the Vault specification, and 𝐂𝐴 is and Core Lightning are making advancement on that. There is dual funding that will help with the on-chain off-chain correlation, and of course there is splicing that will also help on-chain off-chain correlation. There is a problem with Lightning right now, which is Tor is unreliable. Tor is not working very, very well in the last years due to the spam attack and everything that the US. So many Tor nodes are switching back to ClearNet, which is a privacy problem. And there is some discussion to 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. The only recent news was very, very old, and was basically the small progress toward I2P. There are people discussing actually mixed nets instead of I2P. There are many trade-offs between I2P and Tor. Mixed nets are interesting. Many people are discussing a particular kind of mixed net that started with a pre-mined ICO, a token. What could go wrong? But I mean, I would be open-minded. Maybe this would be the first time that the pre-mined ICO token will not completely destroy a project. Maybe everything is possible. And of course, Lightning itself can be used for messages, which is interesting. We could have some kind of recursive, interesting stuff. But I have to move. I have to move faster. Well, there are still the last news we have from Taproot, PTLC, and trampoline routing are basically from the Light Network Summit of 2021. So maybe from this conference, new summits will happen more frequently. We will have more updates. Let's move to fund security. Backing up seats on lighting is not always trivial. Paging core lighting without BIP39 and with this HSM5, which is very annoying. And even if you do back up your funds on chain, you still have to back up the channels, which is of course very complicated, and we know about that. We have the watchtower problem. Watchtower are not really mainstream yet, and there is a discussion I was mentioning before, automation, smart automation between second layer and first layer, and that can also help security. For example, if you have a Breeze-like, Phoenix-like wallet where you're always on the channel, maybe there should be some kind of, well, in some cases there are, some kind of function where over a certain amount, automatically the wallet will propose you to actually close the channel and revert back to single sig security. So there can be some evolution there. There are about backups. Yesterday, the Slashtags presentation was mentioning the possibility to use Slashtags and in general hyperdrives to back up your own seeds or your channels. And the same is done by the Storm protocol designed by Maxim. So there is something going on there. The idea is that we can move toward a world where with only your seed, you can not just recover the deterministic derivation, but you can also ask from other people the encrypted parts of your other secrets, including your channel state, which would be very, very cool. Again, L2 is still far away, but it will help if it will happen. L2 will help a lot with backups. L2 backups are basically trivial. Well, but personally, for example, most of my Lightning wallet, I use a BIP85 derivation of my on-chain wallet as a seed, which can help some advanced user, I guess. Let's move to open standard very, very quickly. Basic specification, advanced specification, kits, development kits and library, and turnkey solutions like nodes like Embassy OS, Raspberry, etc. Basic specification because the Lightning Network specification, the bolts are not. This is an old image by Maxim in Berlin 3 years ago, and these are the layers of the Lightning Network, the layers of the second layer, and these are the way the bolts are covering these layers. It's very chaotic, and not only is chaotic, but many teams are not strictly following this specification either. So keeping people in compatible with bolt specification is starting to become hard. Plus, you don't have only bolt. You have lists, which are different. Of course, you have many kind of specification repositories that may be partially overlapping, partially redundant. So even just a basic specification is a mess. There are some people helping with basically development kits. You have the Lightning development kit, which though also has an on-chain part, which is not trivially compatible with the Bitcoin development kit sponsored by the same spiral entity. So we're discussing with Alekos the difference in philosophies between the on-chain part of LDK and the actual BDK. So some are still a little bit, let's say, scattered around. There is also Maxim also ran the LNPPP association, which is trying to make some kind of proposal for standardization as well, not just new stuff like 𝗟𝗏𝗏 and Storm. And again, I think that the new evolution is in Slashtags and Nostr can be interesting in this regard as well. I'm not still sure how, but many of the abstractions that people will have to do for this stuff may also interfere with the abstraction that we do in Bitcoin standards and libraries specification. So it's still very chaotic. Also, as we discussed yesterday, Slashtags has some relationship, which is not trivial, with all the hypercore hole punch stack, which is different though, separate, but ruled by the same people. So maybe going over some kind of convergence. And I think the Nostr being heavily supported by like 𝐂𝐚𝐧𝐞 may be eventually somehow collide or converge with all the TPD Web5 ideas that are also building on some of the same abstract primitives. So this situation is messy. Well, again, I will, as you can see, I'm working hard, Roy, to get this advisor role for presso. There is a new SDK, which is the very humbly, Roy is comparing himself with 𝗟𝗏𝗏 and he's presenting the presso as SDK. Let's finally move to the important stuff. I have like 3 minutes, right? Okay, but the important stuff is also fast. So, you know what the important stuff is. Let's start from the unit of account. It's obvious that we cannot really move around with normies 0.000001 BTC. There is unit bias, which is a problem. People will buy shitcoin just because they think that they are cheaper, and also it's just annoying. So there is a debate going on between, like there is the idea of SAT, which is the fundamental unit in the protocol, and 𝐕UTXO is expressed in SAT in the Bitcoin protocol. And then there is this bits, that is 0.01 bits is 1 Satoshi, which is basically standardized in BIP 176. And there is an ongoing debate. I'm joking, there is no ongoing debate at all. Forget it, but stop trying to make it happen. Sorry, G, sorry, Adam, this is not good. Since we know that SAP is the standard, the problem is the symbol, right? There are many proposals of symbol, and 2 proposals are getting some traction, basically, the bold and this other one. So this one on my right, there is also a very good website, and it's using stuff like law, like the JAM interface for joint market. So there is a lot, so there's some traction. And the other one is the bold is interesting because when you zap people on Nostr, you see the bold symbol. And so it's very connected with the Lightning Network. And many people supporting the Lightning Network are using the bold symbol on Twitter. There are some problems here as well, though, because for the symbol on your left, the problem is basically cultural appropriation. We have a widespread Turkish Bitcoin community, and it's really, I don't feel comfortable with appropriating the 𝗂𝗶𝗹 idea. So the debate is ongoing. Maybe we can, but let's discuss with our Turkish friend. And so you may think the other one is the trivial consequence, but there may also be a problem of cultural appropriation because we also have a very strong German Bitcoin community. Sorry, but it was very funny. So last one. So the last debate, which is not a debate, is a tragedy. There's still people around that, for analogy with the TCP/IP stack, they are using the acronym BTC-LN. This is disgusting. BTC is not a protocol symbol; is a asset ticker, financial ticker symbol, and the position is wrong. The second layer should be first in analogy with TCP/IP. So the right way to say is LNBBP, because TCP is basically the upper layer, which also has 3 letters instead of 2. So it's great, it's perfect, it works. And also Bitcoin protocol is the name of the base layer and of the whole stack, just like Internet protocol. So this is right, this is wrong. This should not be a debate anymore. Stop doing this. Thank you very much.